It's good to be with you. Look right there. I have a rule at the ACLU, which is so I don't really give a speech, so I'll say a little bit of kind of what Homeboy is, and because of how high-powered you all are, and you're all eating right now, but then I'd much rather be engaged with your questions, and so I find that kind of more interesting. That'll keep me more interested. So I invite you to go to any speech I give anywhere, so that I won't be doing that today. But I'll just kind of a thumbnail real fast what Homeboy is, kind of how I see it, and then my hope is that your questions will generate, a conversation about the whole gang thing. So I was greatly privileged I'm a Jesuit priest, and I was privileged to be assigned in 1986 to the poorest parish in the city of Los Angeles, Dolores Mission, nestled at the time between two huge public housing projects, Pico Gardens and Aliso Village. The largest group of contiguous public housing west of the Mississippi. So at the time we had 8 gangs at war with each other, making it, according to the LAPD, the place of the highest concentration of gang activity in all of Los Angeles was my parish. So I buried my first young person killed because of this sadness in 1988, and I buried my 189th on Tuesday. A young man named Chewy, who worked for us twice, had issues with drugs, but was killed at a Jack-in-the-Box a week before we buried him. So in the early days, we are always trying to respond from below, kind of from the base, rather than from on high. We didn't want to kind of airlift in some idea, but it was like, what are people thinking? So it began with an outreach to middle school, junior high age gang members who had been given the boot from their home school and nobody wanted them. So they were wreaking havoc and violent and selling drugs in the projects. So I walked out to them and I said, if I found a school that would take you, would you go? And then to my surprise, they all said yes. And then I couldn't find a school that would take them. So we started a school. So the convent, the nuns lived on the 3rd floor of our elementary school. And I gathered them together and I said, would you guys mind moving out, and we'll turn your convent into a school? And they said yes. So go nuns. And so I found a house for them in the community, and that brought gang members to the church, which kind of upset the apple cart a little bit, because churches, aren't they, after all, supposed to be hermetically sealed, good people in and bad people out. So that was a kind of a challenge. And then the gang members eventually started to say, if only we had jobs. And so myself and the women, mainly almost all women, we marched around the factories that surrounded the housing projects, trying to find felony-friendly employers, so that wasn't so forthcoming. So we couldn't wait any longer, and then something kind of pivotal happened. It was the unrest of '92, last day of April. And then a movie producer, Ray Stark, had seen an article because we were hiring homies ourselves, and we built a child care center, and we would do a lot of things, And he kind of read in the LA Times that I had suggested that the reason why the poorest community in the city didn't explode, I said, was because we had so many strategically hired gang members who really kept away from igniting the community, and it really happened. They sent the National Guard 3 days after the unrest began, but they didn't need to. We didn't need to. The place was calm because it really, I think that actually was true. So he summoned me to his office. What would help? Long story short, I said, buy this old abandoned bakery across the street from the church, 80-year-old building, and we'll call it, I don't know, Homeboy Bakery, and we'll have enemies from the 8 gangs in the projects working side by side, and he liked the idea. A month later, we started Homeboy Tortillas in the Grand Central Market, and once we had plural, we came up with the highfalutin Homeboy Industries, as if there was any industry involved in this venture. And not everything worked. Homeboy Plumbing really was not a huge success. So somebody thought that was a joke, but actually, no, it didn't work, and we actually started it, and apparently people didn't want gang members in their homes. So there you have it. I did not see that coming. And nobody ever intends to do anything like this, trust me, but we've backed our way into becoming the largest gang intervention, rehab, and reentry program in the world. And so 15,000 folks a year walk through our doors. Who knows how many gang members there are in LA County? They're saying something like 120,000. Nobody really knows. Certainly the gang database is, as Lee Baca would call it, is mainly junk, which is true. But who knows how many. But there are about 1,100 gangs in LA County. And there isn't any zip code in the county of LA that hasn't seen a member of a gang from that zip code who has wandered into our office. So we're in our 4th location where we are right now. So you name anything that might be helpful, we try to offer it. We have an 18-month job training program, so it's a rigorous process to get in, from drug testing to interviewing and stuff. We kind of reverse cherry pick. We don't want somebody who's the most likely to succeed, but in fact least likely to succeed. So you have to, it's really a counterintuitive place that way. What else do we have? We have free tattoo removal. No place on the planet Earth removes more tattoos than we do. We're Monday through Friday, 9 to 5. We have one paid PA, but we have 30 volunteer doctors, 3 laser machines, 15,000 treatments a year. It all started because of a guy named Frank, who I didn't know, but wandered out of Corcoran State Prison, 2 days out of prison, sitting in front of me with "fuck the world" tattooed on his forehead like a damn billboard, huge, huge black. And he says, I am having a hard time finding a job. So I said, well, Frank, maybe we could put our heads together. So where do I send them? McDonald's, do you want fries with that? So I hired him. He baked bread for a while, bagged bread, really. And I went in search of a doctor. So I went to White Memorial Hospital, found a doc with a laser machine. He gave me I think he gave me 1 hour a month to help me with Frank and a few others. And before too long, I had a waiting list of 3,000 gang members who wanted this service. Wow. So, what else do we have? Well, mental health, that's kind of a big thing. We have I think we have 5 paid therapists, but we have 40 volunteer therapists. So in a program we call Homeboy Heals. And it's nice, because people will see our folks in their offices, and everybody's in therapy. Lots of case managers who have loads of about 36 on their list, which is too many. All these curricular things: anger management, parenting, grief and loss, GED. We still have a school with 100 students. We just graduated 37 a month ago. And we have all our businesses. So either when you come in as a trainee, you begin in the Humbles place where you're cleaning urinals for 3 months. And then you move to kind of the clerical place, in the headquarters. And then you move to either one of our 7 businesses or our training programs. So the training are kind of our solar panel installation training program, and then we're connected to unions like welding and electricians. But the in-house stuff, if you will, is a Homeboy Bakery, Homeboy Silkscreen, Homeboy Diner, the only place you can get food at City Hall. We just opened a restaurant called Homeboy bakery and cafe at the LAX American Airlines Terminal. We have 3 mini farms that produce organic produce for our restaurants. Homeboy Homegirls merchandise, where we sell our logo stuff. We're in like 40 farmers markets, depending on the weather, 42 in spring and summer, where we sell our bread and lots of stuff. What am I missing? Alan, I'm missing something. Homegirl Cafe, where women with records, young ladies from rival gangs, waitresses with attitude will gladly take your order. I've got a billion stories, but this one I always tell just because it's sort of kind of the point. So Diane Keaton, Oscar-winning actress, showed up for lunch, and she came with a guy who's there once a week. And her waitress is Glenda, and Glenda's a homegirl, been there, done that, tattooed felon, been to prison, gang member. She doesn't know who Diane Keaton is, so she's taking her order, and Diane Keaton says, well, what do you recommend? And Glenda rattles off the 3 platillos that she particularly likes, and then Diane Keaton says, oh, I'll have that second one. That one sounds good. And it's at that moment something dawns on Glenda. She goes, wait a minute, I feel like I know you, like maybe we've met. And Diane Keaton says, oh, she kind of deflects it humbly, well, I guess I have one of those faces that people think they've seen before. And Glenda goes, no, now I know. We were locked up together. Which, took my breath away when I was told this. But anyway, suddenly kinship so quickly. At Homeboy, you'll hear the word kinship a lot. Oscar-winning actress, attitudinal waitress. It's we belong to each other. How do we obliterate once and for all the illusion that we're separate? How do we dismantle the barriers that exclude? How do we imagine a circle of compassion and then imagine nobody standing outside of that circle? And to that end, what Homeboy wants to do, I think, ultimately is to stand at the edges, at the margins, with the poor, and the powerless, and the voiceless. It wants to stand with the easily despised and the readily left out. It wants to stand with those whose burdens are more than they can bear, and those whose dignity has been denied. It is, in fact, the folks you stand with at the ACLU. You stand with the demonized so that the demonizing will stop. And you stand with the disposable so that the day will come when we stop throwing people away. And that's what it's about. With Trayvon Martin lately, and you always will hear this, no justice, no peace. I get it. But Homeboy wants to say no kinship, no justice. No kinship, no peace. You can be laser beam focused on justice as we all want to be. But if there is no undergirding kinship, if we believe essentially that we don't belong to each other, justice can't happen, period. Can't, won't. You can focus on peace with all your heart and soul, but if there is no undergirding sense that we are connected to each other, then peace can't happen, period. The end won't. So at Homeboy, we always say, no kinship, no justice. No kinship, no peace. And that's kind of the connection. When I look at 30 doctors who come and cast their lot, and 40 therapists who do, and another 50 retired folks who come and GED tutoring, and on and on and on. Yeah, it's about we belong to each other. If you'll permit a brief Jesus moment, because I'm a priest, that you may be one. That was the whole deal. It's only about us. It's about not having an us and a them. It's only about having us. So, I don't know. That's all I want to say. But I'd much rather respond to whatever, and one question will lead to big, long-ass answer, so don't feel like you need to give me 50 of them. Yes?
We're suing the sheriff over the jails. How do you get along with the sheriffs?
With the sheriffs?
Yeah.
Well, I've known Lee a long time, you know. And there's a disconnect there, you know, because he's, I don't want to say he talks a good game. I think he believes, you know, but, you know, in fact, enlightened in many ways, which is also why the rank and file think he's a nutcase. But they think he's a nutcase for all the right things. Now, he's kind of not, I think he hasn't been in the driver's seat, and alarming people have been at the jails in particular. And, you know, he has to take responsibility for that. I don't know how you do this, you know, because that's a kind of a particular thing at the moment, you know. I just want to say a little brief thing, because I feel like, you know, we just celebrated 25 years. And they say if you want to change anything, you have to change the metaphor. And the metaphor has changed in LA, but this is good news. The previous metaphor, the driving force in terms of the gang thing, but it also connects to jails, was a tough on crime, take no prisoners, Operation Hammer, demonizing suppression. That was the metaphor, not just of law enforcement. The people embraced that metaphor. Yes, here's the blank check. Handle it that way. What did that metaphor bring LA County? It brought, in terms of gangs, I'll just speak to that. It brought increasing gang violence every single year until we got to 92, when we had 1,000 gang-related homicides. That's how successful that model was, that metaphor. Then two things happened, and this may feel a little self-serving, but I believe it. Two things happened. One, the unrest, the last day of April in 1992. And a month or so later, Homeboy Bakery was born. On the one hand, it jostled the county, not just the city. People went, yeah, we don't like this metaphor. This is what it's brought us. It jostled us, and I don't even know how to explain how it fully did, but it did. To the gang population, Homeboy Bakery represented a new imagining. So it's despair that leads a kid to a gang. Nobody's ever met a hopeful kid who joined a gang. That's never happened. It's about a lethal absence of hope. That gets you into the gang. There's no attraction, you're pushed. But once you're there, this is what it used to look like. You go, shit, there's nothing I can do. Now I'm stuck. There is no exit ramp off of this crazy violent freeway. That compounded the despair, that increased the violence. So Homeboy Bakery didn't hire 120,000 gang members, but it engaged 120,000 gang members' imagination immediately. They went, oh, and has only progressively done that, I think, more and more. I get 1,000 letters a month from prison. Do you think any chance? And what do you know, it's hopeful waiting that has an impact on public safety. That was a tipping point moment, 1992, and everything shifted. What has happened since then? A new metaphor. Not soft on crime, but smart on crime. Second chances, redemption. What if we were to invest in people rather than just think we could incarcerate our way out of this problem? Let's not demonize anybody. That really happened in LA County. And you can mark it by the first 10 years of Homeboy's existence, roughly 88 to 98, was death threats, bomb threats, hate mail. I hadn't thought about this, but in those first 10 years, I always would brace myself for a question and answer period, because people would scream at me. They'd say, so you think it's fine that people kill each other? I mean, crazy stuff. You know, you'd have to go, well, actually, no, I don't think that's fine. But I haven't had to brace myself for a question and answer period for 15 years, because now it's part of the air you breathe. People get it. If your choice is tough on crime or soft on crime, okay, nobody's going to pick soft. But if your choice is tough or smart, everybody's going to pick smart. People would rather be smart. So that actually happened. So what's happened since the metaphor changed? Every year, a decrease in gang-related homicides and violence since 1992. Now, law enforcement would say, well, thank you very much. You know, well, not crazy, cuckoo bird. You could never draw a short line or a crooked line or any size line between law enforcement and that result. Impossible. But we've had enlightened people, you know, I think. You couldn't compare Daryl Gates to Bill Bratton. Bill Bratton had to get humbled when he came here. But like Charlie Beck, I think is great. Now, whether that stuff gets down there, that's harder. Did anybody read the New York Times Sunday magazine about the gang thing? So, you know, that stuff happened. I have my own kind of critique about it, but how do you get the leadership, if they talk a good game, how does that filter down? It's better than it was. Hollenbeck was just an occupying force when I was there, you know. And the vast majority of anonymous bad hate mail was anonymous only in as much as we didn't have a name, but they'd say, I'm a cop and I hate you and you're part of the problem. Mm-hmm. Cops, you know. So I always say that with this, you have to anchor yourself in the two refusals. You have to refuse to demonize a single gang member on the one hand, and you have to refuse to romanticize a single gang on the other. And that's a tough one. You have to really kind of stay smack dab in the middle. The own health of an individual gang member doesn't allow us to romanticize gangs. That happens all the time in a lot of approaches. Chicago will say that. We don't want to dismantle gangs, we just want to stop the violence. Which is like telling a lung cancer patient, we don't want to cure your cancer, but we want to get rid of that annoying cough that you have. And it's exactly that. And I'm not interested. I think that's a romanticizing of gangs, you know. Gangs aren't all bad, you know, they carpool, you know. And that happens, that really happens, you know. Like, how do we transform this group, you know, they love each other, they have each other's back. It's kind of a nonsensical thing. And it's a romanticizing that's as bad as demonizing, I think, because it's not helpful. I can say more on that later. Yes, ma'am?
I have lots and lots of questions, but I'm only going to ask you 2.
5.
I'm only going to ask you 2. How many people are employed? You mentioned the volunteers versus the on-staff doctors and therapists, but and how many people are employed?
So we have 80 senior staff, and the senior staff are, you know, probably half of them are homies and homegirls,
Yeah, that was
who run and supervise stuff. You know, they're the trainers, if you will. So we have 80 of those. And then we have somewhere kind of fluidly arranged, you know, 200 to 250 trainees at any given time. It's hard to hold the line on that because the minute you stop, you've eliminated the main thing that we offer, which is the hope we hold out. So we had the lottery this morning, so that means you bring one person in every Friday. It's tough.
What does that mean, one person every Friday?
Well, somebody who's been through the process, drug testing, orientation, selection committee, then their name gets in the hopper. And they have to show up on Friday morning and we pick a name.
To get a job?
No, to get brought in as part of they've been approved to be a trainee. But obviously that's an expensive thing. So we try to hold the line, you know.
So I just talked to a woman today who has a program for formerly incarcerated people, and she's attempting to hire someone at a management level. And anyone can apply. And she called me and she says, you know, I don't know what to do because everyone that has the best resume is so culturally removed from this experience that they're not necessarily the people that a person that I would want. So how do you deal with so you have people that come up through the program?
Some do, you know, but you know, obviously the mental health team are you know, folks who are educated and are licensed and that kind of thing. Case managers are probably more, you know, cultural competence in terms of their homies and have kind of know how to do this. And then the security team, and there are all sorts of people on senior staff, especially in the businesses, who have risen to a place where they can train other people. And then we have what we call the core production team. So those are folks who are not quite senior and they're not junior, but they're job secure because they're the ones who know how to bake the bread. And so you kind of need them because it's also a business. So it's a $12 million annual operation. $5 million, or a third of that, comes from revenue generated from the businesses, and the rest we have to beg. And we'd like to have a third come from public entity money. That's hard. Crazy, because we save the county $50 million a year and we save the state $50 million a year. That is so hugely conservative. Because if we weren't engaging them, and there is no place in the country that engages more gang members than we do, in purposeful activity, gainful employment, and hopeful waiting. If we weren't engaging this population, then the presumption would be that the justice system would be engaging them, So, anyway, that's a hard one to, yes ma'am.
Two things. One is.
Okay, no, we gotta stop doing this.
One is, can you talk a little bit about, you said that you have a school, about kind of what you see in terms of like kids who go into juvenile hall and come out in their education, and like whether they're coming out, how much of a disadvantage they're at, whether they're getting any education, and then about the role religion plays in all of your programs.
So first part, education, we've always had a school. We had Dolores Mission Alternative in the beginning. We had that for 20 years in its shape. And then we stopped that, and that got merged into another kind of the Boyle Heights Tech Center. And that was interesting, because in those days there weren't that many places where this kid could go. And then there was a lot. So it was interesting to be able to say, we kind of did what we could, Then we resurrected the idea of having a school again, especially when kids came out of camp. So we have 100 kids, most of them on probation, most of them right out of camp. And the ones who manage that for us is Learning Works. So there's Learning Works in Pasadena, and then ours, which we call Learning Works at Homeboy. And I've been saying this a lot lately because, we just had 37 kids graduate, which is extraordinary. These aren't difficult kids to educate. These are impossible kids to educate. Really, really hard. And they haven't had success. And I asked myself, why did 37 kids just graduate from our school? It's for one reason only. The teachers there love those kids. Why do they show up every day? Because they're being taught by somebody who loves them. And no kid will learn anything from a teacher who does not like him.
Mm-hmm. That's right.
It won't happen.
That's right.
And it's sort of the model at Homeboy. It's all relational. Community trumps gang. We always talk about no matter whatness, the day won't ever come when we withdraw love, support. You may not work here. We may have to say, take a time out, come back when you're ready. Like in a drug rehab, if you're getting high, we can't have you here. But come back when you're ready. You're just not ready. But the doors will always be open for you. So, I think that's key. It's all relational. And if the issue is kids can't imagine a future, and the pilot light of hope is flickering, well, loving, caring adult who pays attention is the only antidote to that, But the context is always communal. It's in community. That's the piece. Your second question was about kind of religion.
You just have the role that plays in all of these different parts of your.
Yeah. So I always get this question, maybe because I'm a priest, and so. But I got it once from the Bush administration, the faith-based division of the Justice Department, and they were sniffing around. I remember. And I don't know. This kind of pushes my button, and maybe I'm sure it's my fault, but. So this delegation came and wanted to know, what is this Homeboy Industries? So So I went on, just as I with you, about what we do, and a listing of all these things we do. And then afterwards, this guy sort of made a face. He said, yeah, well, I don't know. Could you talk about the spiritual part? You know, of course, my answer to that is, I thought I just spent the last half hour doing that. You know, because it pushes my button. Because people want to compartmentalize this stuff. Well, the place is soaked with spirit, you know. It's the holiest place I've ever been in my life. It's holy, it's sacred. Or once I made the mistake of being on the Christian Broadcasting Network, being interviewed by some nice Christian lady. And she made a face after I did a half hour, and she goes, yeah, but it was like she had smelled something bad, you know. And she said, yeah, but how much time do you spend each day praising God? Of course, that's my button. You've just pushed it, and it's a lofty softball over the plate. And I said, but you know, it's funny you should say that, because, you know, 9 to 5, Monday through Friday, you know, that's how much time we spend. We devote the whole day to it, if you know what I mean. So, that's the real deal of it, you know. It's an inclusion. It's a place where people are invited to include even the enemies they work with. Everybody works with enemies. It makes the place as sacred a place as could be. The place is soaked with the Spirit. So, nothing very overt, though we do have a prayer that begins the day. But, you know, our morning meeting is, I always say, this most sacred 10 minutes of our day. Everybody has to be there. It's 300 people packed into the, hanging off the stairwell. It begins with the mission. Somebody reads the mission statement. And then somebody reads the calendar, what's happening today. And then Norma reads who's visiting. So we get 10 tour groups a day. It should just kind of alert us. And then we say tattoo, and they go 9 to 5, or sometimes it's 9 to 1, or it's mainly been only 9 to 5 lately, which is nice. The cafe, they go, what's the soup for the day? The bakery says we're selling these, so we've invented our version of the cronut, you know, the thing that's in New York right now. I think they're calling it the G-sant, you know, so, which is a combination croissant and donut, you know. Oh my God, it's delicious. But I think it's registered Mark the Cronut, so we can't use that. So the homies are coming up with a new title. Then who's the navigator of the day? Navigator is the kind of case manager for the part-timers. Who's the case manager for the day? We say that. We sing happy birthday almost every day because we have so many employees. Somebody has a birthday. It's church, you know. A woman will get up and say very tearfully, you know, I got my kids back yesterday. People will just go wild. People are sobbing, you know. Some will say, you know, I'm sober a year today. People go wild. It's church. Then somebody does a thought for the day. Somebody gets up, and a designated person to kind of talk about anything. Today, a homie who's been in prison a long time, he gave it and talked about how everybody's a whole lot more than the worst thing they ever did. And he spoke quite personally. And then someone will finally do a prayer. We started to do this when we moved into this headquarters about 6 years ago. And we asked this kid, Joseph, I said, I don't know, lead a prayer. So then it became a tradition. And he would say, the first time he did it, he said, everybody bow your heads. And it's been 6 years of every prayer begins with everybody bow your heads. It's funny how this tradition, nobody varies it. They don't say, let us pray, or let's take a moment of silence. They always say, and then they always pray to the God who is our cosmic alarm clock. They always say, thanks for waking us up today. Which always cracks me up. But anyway, it's a holy place. Yes, ma'am.
I was wondering if you could talk about the inclusion of women gang members and like when that happens and how they're integrated into the whole.
Yeah, the question is about inclusion of women, and they're really such a tiny slice of the overall gang population. You know, people will quibble about it. I've heard somebody say 10%. That'd be preposterous, I think. If it's 5, and again, who's counting? because the gang mall or the affiliate or the girlfriend gets counted, I think, by the sheriff. Crazy. Gang member is somebody who's been jumped in to the gang, initiated, given a name. You are in this gang. That couldn't be 5% of the overall gang population, but because it's mainly a guy thing, that's the truth. Having said that, 40% of folks who seek help from us are female. So that also says something about mothers and folks who are kind of more open to getting some help. But we have a lot of, it's hard for Homegirl Cafe because we try to, put women there, obviously. And it's hard to find women who are gang members. I mean, that's the truth. So we have a lot of felons, folks who've been in prison. And you don't have to be a gang member to work there, but you do have to have been on probation or parole at some time in your life, a gang member or a felon. The profile of the female gang member is, I would say it would have to be 100%. I don't think I've ever met a female who wasn't sexually abused. I don't think I've ever met one. So they're really, on the scale of trauma and damage, huge. In fact, in the old days when we used to have the youth authority, well, we have it now, but it's called whatever it's called now, juvenile justice or something. You had one place, which was the Ventura School, or for females, and you had whatever you had, 10 facilities for guys. Well, I was on the state commission a long time ago before Arnold disbanded all state commissions, and our job was to snoop around and inspect, And I was fascinated that Ventura School had 10 times the number of mental health professionals than any of the other places. And that was because the need was so huge. And that's true at our place too, frankly. So if you're a female and you wandered into a gang, you are a really traumatized person. So the profiles are important, it seems to me, because I always maintain that there are 3 profiles of a kid who joins a gang. There aren't 4, there aren't 8, there are only 3. 1, and this is the largest group, it's the kid who is despondent, as I mentioned earlier. The kid who can't imagine a future for himself. If you can't imagine a future for yourself, your present isn't compelling for you. And if your present doesn't compel you, then you won't care whether you inflict harm, and you won't care whether you duck to get out of harm's way. The second profile is in a smaller group than the first baseline group, is the traumatized kid. Damaged kids will cause damage. And that's the kid who's unable to find his way clear to transform his pain, so he continues to transmit it. And then the third group, a smaller group still, is the mentally ill kid. So it doesn't mean that these are exclusive. It can be, this kid belongs to the 1 and the 3 profile, and they're all on a continuum. So the mental health continuum is, borderline personality, bipolar, needs meds, and somewhere down here, Those are the profiles. And I defy anybody to come up with a 4th one or a 5th one. They tend to do it sometimes. Well, it's just a kid who succumbed to peer pressure. No. Well, it's a kid just wants to belong. Nope. It's despair, it's trauma, it's mental health. That's the diagnosis. Getting the diagnosis right is really essential. It's not about good kids, bad kids. It's not bad choices. It's those 3. So if we knew that and we believed that and we trusted that diagnosis, what would we do? We'd infuse hope for kids for whom hope is foreign. We heal the kid who's seeking to transform his pain. We deliver mental health services to this population in an appropriate, timely way. Would that solve this problem? Yeah. Pretty much it would. But we get stuck in all these crazy notions of, don't you see where this choice is leading you, to death or to prison? Which happened on the Dr. Phil show when I was on it. I know, what was I thinking? But, so, he's gonna promote my book, and he was gonna spend an hour on Homeboy, how bad can this be? And we thought we had talked him down from his producers and from doing crazy things, and there I am off stage, and he says, and now, ladies and gentlemen, the founder and executive director of Homeboy Industries, Father Greg Boyle. So I walk up there, and it's a studio audience, and there is his stool in the middle of the stage, and he's sitting there, and my empty one awaits me next to him. And to my horror, on his side of the stage is this gorgeous mahogany coffin, beautiful, on those gurney, four-wheel gurney deals, whatever you call those. On my side of the stage is a perfectly reconstructed jail cell with toilet, bed, sink, bars. They went to great expense for these two set pieces. Well, you already know where this is going to go. They fly out 3 young males, not all, they don't have them on the stage at the same time, but successively come out with their very distraught single mothers. And they're young male, African-American, Latino, and a white kid. And they're all kind of, I guess, gravitating perilously close to vague gang involvement. And with each kid, Phil does this kind of figurative grab by the lapel, slap them, don't you see where this choice is leading you? We have set pieces to tell you where it's leading. And finally, by the 3rd kid, I said, Phil, how do I break this to you? This is not about information. They don't need more data. They know better than the 2 of us that this will lead to death or to prison. But the truth is they don't care whether it will. And that's the key diagnostic moment. Mm-hmm. That's telling you something. That's telling you what this is about. So we've gotten this diagnosis so wrong for so long. We think it's bad kids. If only we got them to be good kids. If choices, you have a choice and you're choosing badly, peer pressure, oh, they just want to belong. None of that stuff is the truth. And yet you'll say gang members have reported to you, as they do to me, I joined a gang, it's all the join a gang and see the world, wine, women, and song, and they're my second family, blah, blah, blah. Well, that's because they can't tell you that what life was really like. And that, my mom used to put cigarettes out on me when she was pissed, and held my head in the toilet and flushed till I nearly drowned. That's why that kid joined a gang. Not for the reasons he just told Oprah, But it perpetuates this idea. Oh, I see. And we want to rationalize this decision. And we want to make it reasonable. Oh, I get it. He just wants to belong. That's why he joined a gang. Nonsense. That's what keeps us from solution. How do we get underneath this and go, oh, okay. Now I see where this is coming from. So we always, at Homeboy, we always talk about come to terms with what you've done, come to terms with what's been done to you. And that's the whole process at Homeboy. You see the truth of who you are, and then you start to inhabit that truth. As we would say there, you're exactly what God had in mind when God made you. Then homies become that. But they forgive themselves and the people who've hurt them. And they gain some resilience. And they engage in attachment repair, which is sort of a key psychological thing. They come to us with a disorganized attachment. Mom was frightened or frightening. And you cannot soothe yourself if you've never been loved and calmed and consoled. Then they re-identify who they are in the world. That's key. They have to say, oh, yeah, I used to think courage was packing a gun. Now I see that that's cowardice, and I won't have any part of that anymore. You have to do that. Then they leave Homeboy after 18 months, and the world will throw at them what it will, but it won't topple them this time.
Yeah, so you've been at this a long, long time, and it sounds like thousands and thousands of young men have gone through it. So but what happens in the 10 or 20 years down the road? Is there some kind of a fellowship that they develop to support Homeboy Industries, or do they just wander off on their own?
No, they all come back because, again, it's sort of whatever your most positive experience of your own family is as a touchstone, where every once in a while you go back and touch it, whatever that is. That's what happens at Homeboy. All the time, every day. People who've moved beyond our place, but they're connected to the place in a relational way. So they come back as, you know, if you're having a hard time and you want your mom's chicken soup or something, I don't know, whatever it is, whatever your touchstone image is, that's what Homeboy becomes for people. And, you know, the people who run the place are folks who I had to fire at one time or another, you know, where I say, oh, you know, I love you, I'll never withdraw support or help. Well, you can't work here right now because you're a mess. You're still gangbanging, you're still out there, you're getting high, whatever it is. Now they run the place, so it, you know, takes what it takes in recovery for people to get to that place. Yes, ma'am.
I used to be a therapist for victims of domestic violence, and a lot of them had criminal records, often from things that happened in relationships. And at one point, just sort of talking about how to deal with the fact that they can get jobs, the sort of idea of something like what you do was brought up. But when they have that kind of thing where there's an abusive person out there who maybe would want to target them, do you think that kind of model would be safe, or have you had anything like that as an issue?
Well, DV is a huge thing with our population, as you can imagine. We have certified trainers, we have a men's group, we have a women's group. It's one of the few things that we have, you know, the court-ordered thing. Because part of the deal is they come to us and you know, there are folks like them in these groups. And plus we don't charge what people charge, I guess. So, but that's always, every day we have to deal with something like that. Of course, anybody, you ask any homie, you know, pull them aside who's just gotten in a fight, physical fight with his lady, and you ask them, and this is so obvious, you know, but you say, did you ever see a man do this to your mother? Well, of course, you know. And then the guy will very tearfully always say the same thing. It is the person I told myself I would never become, and here I am. So there's a lot of work that homies have to do, you know, and the homies tell this to each other. They always talk about, like we had a fight this morning, you know, it happens rarely, but out in the parking lot, and that's so they kind of, this is how they resolve things. So, but it's a teaching moment, you know. They say, well, okay, that guy took you to that place, and that's because you're not doing the work, the internal inner work. And that stuff happens all the time, and the homies do this with each other in a more effective way than I ever could. And I watch them, and it's pretty wonderful, you know, because they take them to the next place of learning, you know. But DV is certainly a big thing. Yes, ma'am.
So I wish to offer you a choice in case you'd rather answer one of these rather than the other.
Okay.
The first is, do you have any practical tips for someone engaged in the intense, important, powerful work that you're engaged in every single day? Any practical tips for how you avoid burnout?
Yeah.
And the other is there a book, a person, someone that you wish you could expose everybody to, besides tattoos from the heart?
Yeah. I don't know about books, but I don't know from books, but we end at 1, don't we?
You can take as much time as you want.
No, well, I hate that when an audience is going, oh God, I gotta get to my 1 o'clock. But so maybe I'll end with this last thing about burnout, you know, because I think I have learned something about that, because I was this close to burnout probably as I was leaving as pastor. And I think you cannot think that you are going to save the world. Nobody, you know, saving lives is for the Coast Guard. I believe that, you know. and it's mutual. One of the great privileges of my life was knowing Cesar Chavez as a friend. Best listener I've ever met in my life. I wish I could do that. If you were talking to Cesar Chavez, nobody else was in the room, even if there were 500 people in this room. But once a reporter had said to him, wow, these farm workers, they sure love you. And Cesar just shrugged and smiled and said, the feeling's mutual. And that's the goal. If this can be mutual, it's exquisite. It'll keep you alive. It'll keep you anchored in the present moment. It'll keep you faithful to the duty to delight in the person sitting in front of you. It's mutual. A reporter asked me once, how's it feel to have saved thousands and thousands of lives? I said, I don't mean to be cute. I do not know what you're talking about. All I know is I show up here every day because my life is changed and saved. I'm going through some treatments for cancer again because it sort of reared its head again. So I'm steroidal, So they will not only take away all my Tour de France medals, but it makes you kind of wired and emotional, so forgive me. But it's mutual. That's the whole deal. And once it's mutual, you will never burn out. Never. But once you think you have to save people, brace yourself. This won't last. So I'll end with a story, and it's my I hate success. I'm not interested in it. Mother Teresa says, we're not called to be successful, we're called to be faithful. And I believe that. I tell that to my staff every day. 2 steps forward, 8 steps backwards. Who cares? Are you faithful? If you care about how many steps you're taking forward, you're going to burn out. So I'll tell you about Lulu. So Lulu, kid growing up in the projects and from this gang, and all his brothers are gang members, and father abandoned them, and mother alcoholic. Anyway, big drug dealer selling crack cocaine, and then he suddenly became his own best customer. And then suddenly he was completely sprung on crack. So, I would gently see him in the projects and say, yeah, you need help. Oh, I'm okay. Until finally he said, okay, I need help. So I sent him I drove him to a drug rehab, and we have lots of those that we have a good relationship with. And he was undocumented, which was another challenge. So I drove Lulu to this place and left him there to begin his rehab. 1 month later, his younger brother Eric does something that homies don't do. He took a gun and put it to his temple, and he killed himself in front of his girlfriend. Homies are more likely to make a foray into enemy territory and hope to die, but they don't do that. So I called Lulu and told him what happened. He was devastated, of course. And I said, I'm going to pick you up for the funeral, but I'm going to take you right back. He goes, I want to come back. I like how this feels, recovery. So I went to pick him up, and so he got in the car, gave me a big hug, and again, I apologize. You tell these stories a billion times, and they don't do anything, but again, I apologize. But anyway, so he gets in the car, and he goes, I had a dream last night. You were in it. And he said, in the dream, we were in a room, say this size, and it was no windows, no lights, no illuminated exit signs, no light creeping under any door. It was pitch black. He knows that I'm in this room with him for some reason, though we're not speaking. And then suddenly in the darkness, I happen to have a flashlight handy, and I pull it out of my pocket, and I aim it at the light switch on the wall, and I hold it steadily. This single beam of light is hitting the light switch. And I don't say a word. And he says to me, I know I'm the only one who can turn that light switch on. Mm-hmm. I'm grateful that you had a flashlight. Mm-hmm. So he follows this beam, and in the dream, he's so nervous and tentative. And he gets to the light switch, and he flips the light on, and the room is flooded with light. And I'll never forget how he said it. He said, the light is better than the darkness. Like that was news to him. And he said, I guess my brother never found the light switch. So that changed my life, that dream. Because if you want to turn the light switch on for somebody, you will fail, you will burn out. There has to be enough for you to know that you have a flashlight. Everybody does. And it has to be enough that you know where to aim it. That has to be enough. And that's the thing for me, you know. And I caution my staff all the time. I just say, yeah, you can't do it. No amount of me wanting that guy to have a life is the same as that guy wanting to have one. That's okay. And so you can sit in your office and lament what happened yesterday and be completely panicked about what's going to happen tomorrow. But the only solution is, now hear this. That's my mantra. You know, like on those announcements, now hear this, a public service announcement. I say that every time before a homie walks into my office. I see him coming, even the most, oh my God, here we go. You know, the most aggravating homie, and I got lots of them. And I always say, now hear this. Now, this moment. Here, H-E-R-E, this place. This kid. Nothing else matters. And that really works, because then you're delighting in who's right in front of you, even if he's exasperating. One last image, and I'm going to let you go. I don't know why this happens, but lately, it's only in the last few years, homies will ask me for blessings. It's Friday. Always happens on Friday. So before I left, I had 90 of them. And they'll come, they never say, you know, Father, could you give me a blessing, please? They always say, give me a bless, yeah, G? Always. Give me a bless. So we do it wherever I'm in the parking lot, I'm always struck by the fact that they are not embarrassed by this, you know, because they always kind of do the same thing and bow their heads. And so a kid was coming in, and I was telling myself, now hear this, now hear this, now hear this, because his name is Luis, and he's just exasperating. Those of you who speak Spanish, he's a pediche. So he's always asking for money. And he's quejándose all the time. He's always complaining, you know. My supervisor came at me sideways, you know. And my case manager's not helping me for nothing, you know. And oh God, and then I need $40, you know, to pay my phone bill. So now hear this, now hear this, now hear this. And he comes in, and it's a Friday, and so he doesn't disappoint, you know. He's complaining, and he's pediche, you know. So he's done it, and then he goes, hey, G, give me a bless, yeah. Very sweet, you know, even the way he can downshift from exasperating to. And he's a kid who's like one of those orphans, you know. Abandoned, he raised himself. There's so many gang members who somehow evaded the whole system, you know. Lived on a couch in somebody's house, you know, nobody noticed, you know. He's one of those kids. So my heart goes out to him. So he knows the drill, yeah, okay. So he comes around on my side of the desk, and he very devoutly bows his head, and I put my hands on his shoulder, and it was his birthday the day before. I'm glad I remembered, and I said, Luis, I'm glad you were born. You know, the world's a better place because you're in it. I'm a rich man to call you my son. Even though, and I don't know why I added this last part, at times you can be a huge pain in the ass. He looks up at me, he smiles, and he goes, the feeling's mutual. And I wouldn't trade my life for anybody's. I'm going to leave my card up here, so grab it and come visit. Thanks a lot, everybody.